Good afternoon. Let's do some business. We are doing it live right here, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro and Tom Looney's excellent news and traffic updates. And we all do this just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money, live on the air now, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And you're on demand. Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Stocks finishing lower today. Investors taking in earnings reports this afternoon from Google, parent company Alphabet, and Tesla coming in after the closing bell. We'll take a closer look at that. The Dow coming in for a closing loss today of 57 points. The S&P 500 ending down 9, and the NASDAQ down 10 points. Of course, markets still absorbing the political earthquakes we've seen lately. Small cap stocks gaining today as a rotation out of mega cap tech names gathered more steam. The Russell 2K small cap index finished 1% higher today and saw its ninth move of 1% or more in the last 10 days as the small caps have taken the spotlight. The last time we saw the Russell 2K index move 1% or more in at least 9 of 10 trading days was back in March of last year. Alphabet and Tesla coming out with earnings after the closing bell today. Google giving investors a reason to cheer, a happy surprise for the second quarter in a row. June quarter earnings of $1.89 a share, and that was 4 cents above the average analyst forecast and 30% above last year's quarter. We did see Google stock today barely budge during the regular trading day of 12 cents at 181 and change, pulling back now by about $3 to 178 and change. Tesla also in the spotlight with Elon Musk doubling down on self-driving car promises on the post-results call today, lacking specifics about how Tesla will get there, dragging the stock lower by about 8% now. Tesla had closed down more than $5 at $246 and change, down about $19 now at $226 and change. We'll have a discussion about this here in just a moment. Musk said that Tesla will solve autonomy or some variation of that several times in the past. The head of Tesla went on a bit further, though, saying Tesla will solve autonomy. In his words, if you don't believe it, sell the stock. He also on the call, Musk admitted that his predictions on the topic of autonomy might have been over-optimistic in the past. Vice President Harris hitting the campaign trail today for the first time since President Biden announced that he would end his re-election campaign and endorsed Vice President Harris for president. Harris was in Milwaukee today, where Republicans Donald Trump and Senator J.D. Vance were nominated by their party at a massive convention last week. Vice President Harris declining to preside over a Wednesday joint session in Congress by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu because she will be in Indiana, we're told, for an event that was previously scheduled. Harris became the presumptive Democratic nominee for president following President Biden's campaign suspension. Benjamin Netanyahu, the leader of Israel, will be speaking to members of Congress during a joint session on Wednesday after being invited by the bipartisan leaders of both chambers back in May. This after, of course, the Hamas terror attack on Israel back on October 7th. I'll discuss the very latest on all that with Lisa Dafchari, editor of the Foreign Desk, will be joining me live later this hour. First on your money, the markets and the economy. Joining me live now, John Najarian. Dr. J, as he's known, on the major financial networks, co-founder of Market Rebels, also author. The latest book is It's Not an Option. Learning How to Trade Options is No Longer an Option. And he's got the laser eyes on, too, following the cryptos, which have been making moves on the upside lately. John Najarian, thank you very much for coming to the line here this afternoon.
Great to be on with you, Frank, as usual. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's start with cryptos, actually. It looks like Vice President Harris seems to be getting into the cryptos. I think she's scheduled now to speak at a conference. President Trump, of course, also, as you mentioned last week, is set for another conference related to Bitcoin and other cryptos. In the meantime, we have seen cryptos make a move. Give us an update on what's happening here. We see a Bitcoin, by the way, around, 67,000 here. Give us an update on what you're seeing.
Sure. Well, that conference is just blowing up, literally, because President Trump is going to be there at the conference, like you and I discussed last week, Frank. And now Elon Musk is scheduled to appear as well. So I can't imagine a tougher ticket, really, to get than the ticket to that conference. Those that have them these so-called whale tickets. Big traders in crypto are known as whales, of course, and they generally have super VIPs or whales that have $10,000 tickets to these events. Those whale tickets right now are going for $30,000 because of both Musk and Trump being there. I don't know which one Ms. Harris might be at, if she's planning on going to the same one. That would be interesting to see them bump into each other in Nashville. I don't know if she's going to be there, and certainly up to this point, she has not put out anything positive about crypto. Gary Gensler and Joe Biden were pretty much against it. So the crypto audience is really loving Mr. Trump and Mr. Musk. So I think that'll be a very thought-provoking and probably headline-grabbing situation.
Most definitely, according to, and of course we have to be careful nowadays on what's on X, formerly known as Twitter, but according to one tweet I saw, Kamala Harris reportedly going to be speaking at the Bitcoin conference per Fox News. So let's see what happens there. And apparently, according to Mark Cuban, apparently he said today that he's been taking some calls from the Harris camp regarding Bitcoin, so she might be warming up to it. So we're going to keep an eye on that. So cryptos certainly have become, it seems, an issue here and the future of crypto. And given all that, we see the cryptos moving up in all of this. John Najarian, what do you see ahead here for Bitcoin and the other crypto names?
Well, today's the first day that spot Ethereum ETF was out in the wild, and there will be many, just like there are with Bitcoin, but the Ether or Ethereum spot ETF is out there now, and it gathered $600 million in the first half day for that ETF. That's, if it's not record inflows, it's pretty close to it. And the faithful are definitely looking at that as an endorsement that TradFi people are getting into Bitcoin in a bigger and bigger way through Bitcoin and Ethereum. I think it's going to probably, as we get a few more of these out there, I won't be surprised to see, $2 billion, $3 billion worth of Ethereum in that ETF. And again, the more you have that, the better the arbitrage opportunities and also the better penetration into traditional finance markets through those ETFs.
All right, what are your thoughts on the Ethereum ETFs? I've seen some headlines today, like a bond with no yield. Investors are split on Ether ETFs. You probably have seen the discussion about this, and of course, this was a very anticipated event, and we see Ethereum down about $10 now at 3,473 or so after a big pop recently. What are your thoughts about this new vehicle?
Well, you're right. Neither of them have yield. Both of them, you can establish yield by selling options. And to do that, you'd have to go get that book. It's not an option.com. But outside of that, Frank, yes. I think this is for folks, again, that aren't comfortable with hardware wallets, software wallets, people that aren't comfortable with some of the complicated things that Bitcoiners and anybody in the digital asset space has to become very familiar with, and that's those two things, either a hardware wallet or a software wallet, because you don't want to leave your coins on an exchange, because not your Bitcoin anymore once it's on an exchange. You need to be able to take it off and custody it yourself. And I think anybody that you ever have on this show would say that's true. The issue is with these ETFs, you're able to trade them in the same account that you trade Apple, that you trade NVIDIA, or any of the other stocks that you might trade. It goes in the exact same way. And I think these will become very popular, both the multiple ETFs for Ethereum as well as the ones for Bitcoin, which have already proved to be very successful.
On the air live with Dr. J, John Najarian. as he's known on the major financial networks and a longtime contributor on this program. John Najarian, let me get back to the Tesla news here. We see Tesla down about 8% now, and Elon Musk did speak on his earnings call this afternoon. Tesla, of course, one of the Magnificent Seven. What about Tesla here?
Well, that certainly wasn't great news for Elon Musk or the EV industry in general. Again, you've got great companies like Rivian and a host of others that are really fully committed to electric vehicles or EVs. And Tesla makes more of them than anybody except BYD over in China. And I think a lot of what we're seeing right now is the difficulties that they faced because of the pressure on the space, both provided by, for instance, Hertz, when they dumped their entire fleet of Tesla EVs onto the market. So you can imagine what, would happen if, not that it would ever happen, but if they dumped, 20% of all Cadillacs onto the market at the same time. You'd be killing the money that people would expect to get on their trade-in and so forth from that Cadillac, or in this case, from a Tesla. And now Hertz pretty much did away with that, at least for several months. So I think this level of sales at Tesla will be somewhat easy for them to step over going forward. But, we have to look at what they just did, and what they just did was came in with revenue that was light of expectations, and nobody, not even Elon Musk, can talk his way out of that.
Next time you're in Beverly Hills, and hopefully that'll be soon, you'll probably notice a lot of Cybertrucks around. If you want to get attention, you got to get behind the wheel of one of those these days. I saw one report that Cybertruck sales have taken off, and even up there with the Ford 150 apparently.
Yeah, with the F-150s, and there hasn't been that much in the way of great endorsement, certainly on the memes on Instagram, on TikTok, or even Twitter, but people still love those crazy looking Cybertrucks. And you're right, they are eye-catching because it's a combination of that DeLorean look from Back to the Future and a soapbox derby vehicle of some sort. But again, you wrap it with some sort of business logos and things like that, and it's going to catch people's eyes. We got to talk to you, perhaps off the air, Frank, about our big event over in Miami in October. We're going to be in Vegas. Let me see, that's August 1st and 2nd at the Paris Hotel for a big conference, and then we're doing a big one. We might need an MC, Frank, so you might need to be out there in Miami.
Yes.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Yes,
all right.
And I know it very well. I know Miami very well, having lived there, grew up there actually, so I know that area very, very well. So I'll give you the tour of South Beach and the whole works. Absolutely.
Well,
we're on the air live with the one and only.
If you want to go to mastermind.marketrebellion.com, folks, you can sign up for that event out there in Miami, October 9th, 10th, and 11th. And I'll talk to you off air about that, by the way, Frank.
That's wonderful, John. Thank you for that. And we're on the air live with John Najarian. And John, what about the other big earnings news today from Google parent company Alphabet, another one of the Magnificent Seven names here we track?
Well, I think everybody's a little bit taking a back seat to the news of the president stepping not down, but not accepting the nomination that he would have otherwise been given for his party at the DNC, August 19th. So believe it or not, even Tesla, Google, any of these stocks, even CrowdStrike, aren't really breaking the headlines the same way President Biden was with his Secret Service head. So a lot of what we talked about today, Frank, in the markets was the head of Secret Service stepping down, Miss Chettle, and then, of course, President Biden stepping away over the weekend. And that's still having some ramifications in the market, reverberations, or however you'd like to put that. But I think overall, the markets do look fairly strong. And I think we're going to continue to see Gold, which just has, touched new record highs. We're going to continue to see gold very actively accumulated as we go into the election here.
John DeJurian watching the blockchain as well as the gold chain. You're absolutely right about that. And silver also has been making moves this year. And NVIDIA, let's not forget about NVIDIA, the Magnificent One, closing lower today by about $1 back to 122 and change, slightly lower in after-hours trading. What about NVIDIA here?
NVIDIA is a great story. I know that a lot of what has been said on the Democratic side is contra to what Mr. Trump says about energy and the need for drill, baby, drill. I would think that the better the president, the former president, number 45, the better his numbers get, the more pressure there will be on some of the energy stocks. That might seem counterintuitive, but the reason it's not is the more supply you have, generally speaking, prices go down with that higher supply. The oil stocks have done extraordinarily well under President Biden because, of course, prices for crude oil have doubled. So I know Americans wouldn't appreciate another doubling, but put more fossil fuel into the system, in other words, more supply, you're going to see lower prices.
On the air live with John DeJurian, and that CrowdStrike fiasco, the impact of that continues with the Delta especially impacted by all this. And we see CrowdStrike stock rebounding today following that washout over the past couple of days, up nearly $5 at 268 and change. Would you be touching that one at all?
I did today, in fact. And it was down to 258 on the lows of the day today. So that was down, I think, about 13 to 15% again. But then, as you say, very accurately, it reversed and finished positive on the session, which was pretty amazing. When you look at that volume, I think that the bad news isn't quite over yet because there will be lawsuits, there will be class actions and so forth against CrowdStrike for what occurred. But the beneficiaries, Sentinel One, which is symbol S like Sierra, and Palo Alto Networks, PANW, are two of the plays that I'd be looking at aggressively here because they're competitors to CrowdStrike, and they benefit from a softer CrowdStrike.
All right, and Microsoft looks like that stock hasn't moved much in reaction to this fiasco, but what about Microsoft here?
I like Microsoft. And again, just as you say, this, even though the blue screen of death, which is a Microsoft issue, that came up because of CrowdStrike, because of what CrowdStrike had done, not because of Microsoft per se. So will they bear some responsibility? In some people's minds, perhaps, but I think it's a lot harder to prove that than it is to say, well, this was the economic impact because of what CrowdStrike did.
All right. Any other specific places, John DeJurian, where you're putting money now and/or taking it off the table?
I would say we're very much keeping our eye on the energy space still because, again, the election has not happened yet. Drill, baby, drill will ultimately hurt some of those stocks. But overall, the energy plays are where I'd want to be. DQ, for instance, that's not the ice cream stand.
Yeah.
But DQ is an energy play, and I think that's an interesting one. We were buying that again today.
Terrific, John. Thank you very much, and you will hear from me very shortly on what we were talking about there. Hope to see you in South Florida then for that big conference. John DeJurian, Dr. J, as he's known in the major financial networks. Thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon. And right after the freeways now, 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues, 790 KABC. Good afternoon. A bit of a pullback for stocks today with the Dow down 57 points at the bell at 40,358. The S&P 500 down 9 at 5,556. And the NASDAQ down 10 points at 17,997. The yield in the 10-year note now at 4.25%. After the closing bell, Tesla came out with earnings that were a bit of a disappointment, and Tesla stock, which had closed down to $5 and change on the day to $246 and change, down another just about $20 now at $226 and change, down about 8% in after-hours trading. Google, which gained slightly during the trading day, up 12 cents to 181 and change, pulling back about $3 after hours to 178.40 on better than expected earnings news. Nvidia today, the Magnificent One, down nearly $1 at 122 and change. CrowdStrike rebounding today after that washout following this fiasco with this IT meltdown. CrowdStrike shares up nearly $5 today, back to 268 and change. And taking a look at what else is happening, of course, on the crypto front, we've seen Bitcoin make some pretty big moves lately, up about 400 now at 65,925. Ethereum had those Ethereum ETFs out there today, down $11 now, back to 3,473. And Doge at the moment at 13 cents. And now the latest news here in 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Good afternoon. Turning now to the Middle East. It appears a meeting between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Biden appears to be back on track upon Prime Minister Netanyahu's arrival in Washington yesterday after it seemed up in the air as President Biden continued to convalesce from a bout with COVID-19. Prime Minister Netanyahu flying into Washington yesterday for meetings and an address to Congress. Also, we're getting word now that President Trump will be meeting with Netanyahu on Friday at Mar-a-Lago. Vice President Harris declined to preside over a Wednesday joint address to Congress by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu because she will be in Indiana for an event that was previously scheduled, according to her staff. Harris became the presumptive Democratic nominee for president following President Biden's campaign suspension over the weekend and will not be in attendance at that address and will not preside. Netanyahu will be speaking to members of Congress during a joint address on Wednesday after being invited by the bipartisan leaders of both chambers back in May. All this following the Hamas terror attack on Israel back on October 7th. Meanwhile, Israeli tanks advance deeper into southern Gaza as more ceasefire talks are expected. Following all of this closely is Lisa Daftari, editor of the Foreign Desk, joining us live now this afternoon. Lisa, thank you very much for taking the call here.
Thank you for having me again.
More tumultuous events here. The arrival of the Prime Minister of Israel. He was not greeted by President Biden or Vice President Harris upon arrival, and also the Secretary of State was not there either. Give us your reaction to this important visit here.
You know, with all of this being up in the air, it's a bad look, and it's a bad look across the board. This is something I have said all throughout my career, and I will say it many more times because I think the American public has to emphasize this going forward. Foreign policy, especially our relationship with Israel, particularly for the stability of the Middle East, particularly for our own national security, is a bipartisan subject. There is no daylight. There should not be any sort of doubt about where Israel stands in their relationship with the United States, irregardless of who is the President of the United States and who is the Prime Minister of Israel. Now, this started back when President Obama was in office, and there was this rift between Obama and Bibi Netanyahu, and everyone chalked it up to be a personal rift between the two of them. But even then, we saw the dangers of seeing this daylight. We saw it in the shift or the pivot in U.S. foreign policy regarding Israel. It wasn't as ironclad as it has always been. Then we went to the Trump administration. It was completely different. Bibi then knew he had a friend again in the White House, and we can see this based on the meeting that is now set up between Trump and Bibi Netanyahu. It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be a hop skip between administrations when, as far as our friends are concerned, or our enemies, like looking at the Iran regime and how they have been appeased and wined and dined in one administration, like the Obama administration, and then put under pressure during the Trump administration, and then again, appeased during the Biden administration. Bibi Netanyahu is a representative that is coming from Israel at a very tumultuous time. They are fighting a fight for all of us against Hamas, an American-designated FTO, foreign terror organization. And, of course, our relationship with him is something that has to be broadcasted to our enemies to say, look, Hamas, look, Hezbollah, look at Iran's regime that is puppeteering its proxies and shooting at U.S. carriers in the Red Sea. Look at this. This is our relationship with Israel, and we will stand together. We will stand united against radical extremism and against anybody who threatens Israel or the United States.
On the air live with Lisa Dafchari, editor of the Foreign Desk, discussing what's happening in the Middle East, and a big speech tomorrow by Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, who will be speaking to members of Congress during a joint address tomorrow. He was invited by the bipartisan leaders of both chambers back in May. And all of this, of course, following the October 7th terror attack by Hamas on Israel. Also, Iran attacked Israel, and then the Houthis also, Israel intercepted a missile fired from Yemen as the conflict with the Houthis is escalating. It's been a while since we've had a chance to talk about all this military action, Lisa, but what about the latest military moves?
Yeah, it's interesting how this is all taking place, particularly given the landscape of our tumultuous election year going on here in the United States. It goes back to what I was saying with Iran's regime really feeling as though they can, at the very least, play out the clock, if not depend upon another administration that is perhaps Kamala Harris winning election and becoming the president of the United States. The fact that we don't have that this consistency with the pressure being put on Iran's regime. That is why we are seeing all of this drag out this long. The other thing that I actually spoke at a conference yesterday at Pepperdine about is, the fact that Israel's relationship with the United States goes back many decades. Israel has waited for a military approval from the United States in many instances, waiting to go into Gaza, waiting to go into Rafah, many times not getting the blessings that they wanted, many times not getting the military equipment that they wanted, and having to wait for that approval. Perhaps with a different administration, that would not be the case. And again, I think that the military part of all of this has dragged out. The hostages have not been released. I mean, would there and could there have been an instance in which the military pressure on Hamas would have been so great and so fortified by the Western world in supporting Israel that the hostages would have been given back in the first 24 hours? Could we have put Hamas in a stronghold, in a position that they would be forced to give back the hostages? And I want to remind everyone there are still at least 5 American hostages, and we hope that they are alive. There has been no concerted effort to emphasize that there are American hostages being held by Hamas. And when I say Hamas, that means Iran's regime. No extra pressure on Iran's regime to cut it out. Stop supporting Hezbollah. That war may start in the next couple of weeks. According to my sources, we may be seeing a Israel-Hezbollah war as early as early August. And, that is Iran's regime giving the weapons to Hezbollah. And as many of you know, Hezbollah, the most endowed, well-trained, stocked up terror proxy of Iran's regime, is waiting to rain down those missiles on Israel. They have short, medium, long-range drones, and they have well-trained fighters. And that is something that is going to be extremely bloody and extremely horrific. And according to many of my sources, it's going to make the Hamas war look like a cakewalk. This is what we're looking at. This is the military front of this war. And of course, Frank, you know very well, better than anyone else, what the information war looks like on our end, what the journalists are up against, what social media is telling people. The fact that Kamala Harris feels that she is under pressure to perhaps distance herself from the talk that Bibi is giving in Congress, that is being boycotted by many of the leftist Democrats. The fact that she feels as though that may cost her some votes and that she has to, not participate or perhaps, be united in their boycott. The event that she is going to, that was planned in advance, could have been postponed. I believe it's a fraternity or sorority that she's going to.
Yeah.
It could all be postponed because this is a world leader, our partner in the Middle East, and again, our national security depends on it. There are American hostages being held by Hamas, and we must show Israel support in everything that they're doing to fight this fight.
Lisa, thank you very much for that thorough analysis. As always, we'll be tuned in to Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to Congress, joint address tomorrow to Congress, and we'll be following this with you very, very closely, as well as all of these epic developments. Lisa Dafchari, editor of the Foreign Desk, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon on 790 KBC.
My pleasure.
Out to the freeways now. Out right now to 790 KBC traffic update. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KABC. Vice President Harris hitting the campaign trail today for the first time since President Biden announced that he would be standing down in his reelection campaign and endorsed Vice President Harris for president. Harris was in the battleground city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where Republicans President Donald Trump and Senator J.D. Vance were nominated by the GOP at a massive convention last week. Joining us live now is the Honorable Steve Cooley, the former Los Angeles County District Attorney who almost defeated Kamala Harris in the California State Attorney General contest back in 2010 in what was one of the closest statewide elections in California history. Harris was the DA in San Francisco back in those days. Steve Cooley, thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
My pleasure, Frank.
Great to have you with us here. And you went head-to-head with Kamala Harris back in those days, and certainly now the GOP will be locking horns with this new ticket still to come together, but she's the presumptive Democratic nominee at this point. Give us your thoughts on all of these all this epic news we've seen lately.
Well, going back to 2010, I did win Election Day when they counted ballots cast on Election Day and absentees. I eventually lost after they counted all the ballots, including all the harvested ballots and the provisional votes, where she beat me in every one of the 58 counties, and I lost by 0.3 of 1 point. So it was a real nail biter. History would have been different if I would have won. But now let's look forward to the future. And the future would be bleak if Kamala Harris were to be elected president. She is not qualified. As a matter of fact, she's wholly unqualified for a wide variety of reasons.
A lot of talk about her push for Prop 47 back in those days, and you know this better than anyone, so go ahead and lay it on thick and tell us what we need to know here.
In 2014, Prop 47, written by George Gascon, of course, and some of his Soros friends, was titled falsely by Kamala Harris. She titled it the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act. Well, that sounds really nice. And to the voter, hearing that title and listening to the description that she wrote, they voted for it overwhelmingly. And since 2014, we've all paid the price for Prop 47. It basically reduced greatly or eliminated many theories of serious theft, and it reduced from felony to misdemeanors the possession of hard drugs, such as fentanyl, heroin, etc., methamphetamine. So that proposition has probably wreaked more havoc on the criminal justice system and the law-abiding public than anything else in California's history. And with one stroke of a pen and a false statement, Kamala Harris was a key cause of that passing, and she should be blamed for its result.
On the air live with the Honorable Steve Cooley, former Los Angeles County District Attorney. Fast forward to 2024 now. George Gascon is the current DA who's in a tough fight to keep his job against veteran prosecutor Nathan Hochman. And it looks like Hochman's in the lead at this point. What about this important race coming up here in November?
Well, I'm going to go on a little limb here and tell your audience, Hochman is going to win in a landslide. Not just a landslide, but a big landslide. The only question is, will he reach the record of landslide, which I set against Gil Garcetti, of 28 points? That would be a mega landslide. As long as we're speaking about the Gascon-Hochman race, I'd like to remind the listeners out there that Kamala Harris enthusiastically endorsed George Gascon over Jackie Lacey, a career prosecutor who knew her craft, the first African-American elected to be DA in L.A. County, the first woman to be elected DA in L.A. County, thoroughly qualified, and, of course, Kamala Harris endorsed Gascon, who has also wreaked great havoc on public safety and the law-abiding public since he's been in office. But his days are numbered. We have that to look forward to.
And the point has been made by Nathan Hochman, certainly on this program, that he has prosecuted many cases, whereas George Gascon never prosecuted any, which is unbelievable, really.
George Gascon's never prosecuted a criminal case, a civil case, either as a prosecutor, and never defended any either. He's not really a lawyer. He passed the bar. He's not really practiced law. Nathan Hochman's experience is incredibly extensive, broad, and diverse. He'll bring a lot of talent to that office, and of course, it needs it. They need someone like Nathan Hochman. But speaking of prosecuting cases, Kamala Harris did not actually try very many cases herself. She bounced around from the Alameda County DA's office, where she was considered to be generally inept, over to the San Francisco DA's office, where, with the help of Willie Brown, she ran successfully to become the San Francisco DA. And as Attorney General, she didn't do any cases, didn't actually prosecute cases. So these people running around saying, oh, she's going to prosecute this campaign against Trump because she's a prosecutor, poppycock. She's not much of a prosecutor when it comes to being a real prosecutor. She's going to be exposed as the elitist that she is. And it's going to come out pretty clearly that she's calculating, but not very smart, not capable of critical thinking. And I think the next several months, 3 months and 10 days or whatever, are going to be fascinating. Fascinating.
And the reform of Prop 47 also on the ballot. What's your impression of this measure that voters will have to decide in November?
It is a great step in the right direction, especially to help small mom and pop stores, retailers, and others deal with the rampant shoplifting and other forms of theft that are going on right now as a result of Prop 47. But to be quite frank, this reform, as good as it is, would not be as good as not having Prop 47. Too bad that horrible law got visited upon us by the likes of Kamala Harris and George Gascon and George Soros. But the reform, definitely a great step in the right direction.
The Honorable Steve Cooley, thank you very much for joining us live here, and look forward to many more conversations with you. That is the Honorable Steve Cooley, the former Los Angeles County District Attorney, live with us here on Mottek On Money, 790 KBC.
Former Navy SEAL Mike Ritland keeps it real on the Mic Drop podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Mitch Aguiar.
Rest is definitely important, and I think a lot of people overlook rest. I've definitely taken time off when I get injuries. If you're training while you're injured and you're not doing things correctly, I think it's better to just kind of sit out, healed. And I've done that several times where I've had to take time off, and then when I come back, people are like, you got better.
Mic Drop, raw, unfiltered, intellectually sound, wherever you listen.